From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Sherry. Welcome to the very heart of prime time. So glad that you're here. Chris Kenny, of course, 5 o'clock into Peter Credlin, into Andrew Bolt, Sherry, then us, the late debate. The menu is set for a massive 2024. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful summer. Now, as we know, the end of last year wasn't fantastic for the Prime Minister for all the most obvious of reasons. He was in a world of pain because of the way he had promised the Australian electorate back in 2022 that literally everything would be cheaper under a Labor government. Reality was cost of living continued to be a significant issue and will continue to be a massive one for us again this year. Now, of course, there was the Airbus Albo business where, despite the fact that they tried to carry the one and pretend this one didn't count, he was a Prime Minister who loved flying overseas on Toto One. Remember the nickname that he has given to the Prime Ministerial jet. And then there was, of course, $450 million being spent on a question that Australia didn't just answer no, it answered hell no on it when it comes to The Voice. But emblematic of this was that the Prime Minister, this was his true want for last year. Well, now, with cost of living still being a problem, The Voice not existing right now, and the Australian public starting to turn, there was a great need for something to change during this summer. But of course, that hasn't happened. When it came to the polling couldn't have been clearer at the end of last year, and it's starting to show its head again at the start of this year, where voters were saying that everything was getting worse except the China relationship, and that Labor's primary vote, according to the latest YouGov poll at the end of last year, was the lowest since 1901. Yet the expectations are that because of the Teals, it would be very difficult for the Liberal Party to get anywhere near 76%. So the political debate about 2024 is about whether the government goes early for an election, like most first-term governments do, and as a result of that election, will it stay in a majority of just a couple of seats, or will it be forced into minority? If it is forced into a minority, then, of course, the tail that wags the dog, to continue the Toto metaphor here, is none other than the Teals and the Greens. But what about that reset? Not the great reset that they talk about over at Davos as they plan to meet again to tell us how the world should work, but the reset of a new calendar year. Moving into 2024, the expectations were that we'd forget all the problems of last year and everything would feel a whole lot better because we were now in a brand new year and there was a new focus and everyone wasn't as cranky as they were last time. Well, as you may have heard, a big poll, front page of the newspapers yesterday, showed that Australian voters say that Anthony Albanese is no help with the issue that remains the number one issue in the country, and that is cost of living. Now, I can't pretend that the monthly inflation rate has not gone down. Electricity and petrol still too high, but inflation is about where it was the best part of 2 years ago. But still, the reality of what the numbers tell us and what you are living is why these polls are the way that they are. With 51% of Australians saying that the country is headed in the wrong direction. That's the same findings that have been in places like the Turnbull Times via the Essential poll. 74% of people saying that cost of living is the number one issue. 81% of people saying that the government has not done enough about cost of living, despite the fact that they constantly tell us, oh, yes, we have, please believe us, yes, we have. 68% of people don't think anything's going to get better in the next 6 months either, and 51% of people have believed what we have said for 10 years, that the cost of transition to the new dream of green is going to increase their power bills. But one thing that inevitably happens as we roll into Christmas, we laze about during the new year and we slowly but surely return to work. Some people in the first week of January, some in the second, some will get back there around Australia Day. And of course, if you happen to be working in a university, you'll be back in March. But there is one thing that always happens, which is that governments love to roll out bad news when they hope no one is looking. So my way of looking back at what they tried to hide from us this summer is to reference a movie from about 20, 30 years ago. Who knows? It's an old movie, but it's called I Know What You Did Last Summer. If you've seen the movie, you know what it's about. Otherwise, you just need to know that the bad guy is going after the good people because of what they did last summer. So our version of this, just to annoy the lefties on night one, is I know what you said this summer. And here's 5 things that you need to know that took place over summer when you were either on holidays or they were hoping that you weren't paying attention. First, we got a report in late December about just how much money politicians spend on themselves. And the answer is millions and millions of dollars. But interestingly, we also finally got some numbers about just how much money the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister have been spending on private jets. Well, according to the Department of Defence, they released these numbers that finally tell us about their use of private jets. Now, they refer to it as a whole bunch of other things, but as for the cost of Airbus Albo, the Department of Defence has released politicians' spending on VIP flights, revealing that Anthony Albanese spent $3.3 million, count them, $3.3 million in the financial year that has just passed. But then, as we know, there's the frequent free flyer, Richard Marles. Now, Richard Marles represents the seat of Corio, that is in and around the area of Geelong. But because he doesn't want to go to Melbourne Airport, or he doesn't want to use the flights that fly out of Avalon Airport to almost anywhere in the country, he has private jets fly him around. Now, finally, we've got a number about just how much money the Deputy Prime Minister has been spending on the planes that are just for himself, because they are more convenient, not more secure. Private airlines, or dare I say public airlines, are quite secure. Not a known series of problems there, but still. Marles apparently spent $2.1 million on VIP flights in that financial year of July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023. Now, I noticed a few smart Alecks saying, well, that's way below what you were talking about on television last year. Yes, there of course was plenty of reporting that apparently the number was $3.6 million, but it now turns out that the reality of the final number is $2.1 million, as if that's magically better. Now remember, the Defence Minister has a right to a private jet to be able to fly to the places that are not serviced by commercial jets. He has the right to be able to do it for national security reasons, but the reality is that, as has been proven, many, if not most of his flights were actually out of Avalon, where he could have caught Jetstar, Virgin, Qantas, anything else, Bonza if he wanted to. But no, it wasn't as convenient for him. So he got the private jets, $2.1 million worth. Remember, all that information last year that they tried to say was national security, and that's why we couldn't possibly know about it. Well, it all finally came out, but it all came out while they hoped you were in the pool or hanging around a barbecue. But even bigger than that is the cost of politics itself, the cost of MPs and senators. Now, we're not talking about their wages here. We're talking about what they spend on themselves, their offices, their printing, their staff, the machinery that is in and around the people who sit in the House of Representatives and, of course, in the Senate, the hundreds of politicians that we have amongst us. Well, we learned that that bill is $30 million. $30 million that was spent by MPs on the machinery of government, on the people who take care of their social media and all the rest of it. So one of the things they tried to hide this summer was just how much they spend on themselves. The second, and this is a big one, which is that there are going to be major changes to people who have diesel or hybrid cars. Now, of course, hybrid cars are ones that have a battery that often charges from the motion of the car, but it still has a petrol engine. But it means that, say, the average 300 kilometres you're able to get out of a petrol vehicle, with the added extras, you're able to push it out maybe another 100, maybe 200 k's, meaning you have to buy less fuel, which of course is still at near record highs right now. And of course, electric vehicles are the preferred choice of those who can afford them, because the average car isn't that damn cheap, but also it is the definite way we are apparently going to change the world when it comes to emissions. But when Australians have the option of what they're going to buy, I can tell you what happened. In the past 12 months, there were 98,000 hybrid cars that were sold in Australia last year. This compares to the 33,500 electric vehicles that were sold in Australia last year. You may well have seen the headlines, if you paid any attention to the news over summer, about an explosion in the number of electric vehicles. Now, for those that are half listening, ready to run off to the umpire and say, there they are going again in Sky News prime time, I don't have a problem with EVs. Obviously, if it's a better mousetrap, then fine, people will buy it. My issue has always been about the cost of the things and the ease with which people can charge. let alone the issues when it comes to servicing or resale. These are all reasonable reasons why people don't buy them, not because they're desperate to pollute the atmosphere or do a bit of rolling coal. But guess what is about to change? The government doesn't like that you are buying a hybrid vehicle over an EV. So now, hybrid vehicles are going to be added with a luxury car tax. Now, put simply, the way that this works is that thousands of dollars are now going to be added to the price of these cars. So you, the consumer, looking at the electric vehicle or the hybrid vehicle, that if they're basically the same price, you'll end up picking the electric vehicle. The government, however, knowing that most people won't choose the electric vehicle now, they might do it in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. Well, of course, if you're selling the best part of 3 times as many, means that they get to win both ways. There is a extra tax that they will be adding, an extra few $1 million that they will be making for the budget, while saying that their true preference is the vehicle that doesn't have the same taxes. But then there are some issues when it comes to new vehicles that will be the most popular vehicles that Australians have purchased for many years, and that is things like utes and SUVs. And busy roads means that the more cars that we register means, yes, there are going to be more emissions. But the government also decided to announce, while they hoped that you were paying attention to anything but what they were doing, that there is about to be a change in the vehicle emissions standards, which again will mean either the direct cost of these vehicles or the retrofitting of these vehicles will all, again, have a scenario where if the electric vehicle is the same cost as the ute, well, then maybe you'll choose the electric car. And I know that this year that there's going to be big utes that are coming out. There are solar-powered cars that were just up on the technology show over in Las Vegas, so this may well be a future. But the reality is right now, the tougher emission standards, particularly focusing on things like utes, are going to change the types of cars that the government wants you to buy. But right now, Australians, when they make a choice of what they're going to buy, is they buy an SUV for their family, they buy a ute for their small business, they buy a hybrid because they think it's a way to stretch that petrol dollar. And of course, 2 of the biggest sellers in this range are the Toyota Hilux and, of course, the Ford Ranger. 2 big, beautiful cars that the government desperately does not want you to buy. Why? Because it annoys Twitter. Because don't forget, no matter what Australia does, even if we got rid of every single car and turned off every single light, China still produces 30% of the emissions that are changing the world, as opposed to Australia's 1%. The third thing that they did, hoping that you wouldn't notice, is that there are going to be some major changes to aged care policy. Now, we spoke about this towards the end of last year, but it's something that a lot of people were worried about and sent me emails about over summer. Well, now we are starting to move towards a big change that could well be in the May budget. You see, aged care, of course, is a system where all of us at one point or another will either end up in a facility or, like many people, you hope that you're able to have that facility at home. How much money you have is often a determinant about the types of money that you need to put forward, how much you have to give the private institution. But what things make you rich are part of the picture about how much you have to pay. And surprisingly, one of the things that is expected to get even more attention is that even if you don't have an awful lot of money in the bank, if your house is worth a lot of money, well, then that would mean that you may well end up being deemed to be rich, meaning that you should pay a higher percentage than the people who don't have property when it comes to the aged care system. Now, Annika Wells, who is the aged care minister, has not announced this as a policy, but she certainly has foreshadowed it in conversations that she had with the Channel 9 newspapers, hoping to just float the balloon, and this will happen in the next couple of times. So pay attention that now the family home finally, and yet again, dare I say, becomes a picture about whether you are rich or not. You see, again, the war on baby boomers is to suggest that you must move into a 1-bedroom unit for the sake of the economy, for the sake of the housing stock, or potentially for the sake of how much you have to pay in aged care. But of course, most, if not all, people that are watching us right now who've got a couple of spare bedrooms, well, that's the house where all of your family memories are. It's a house that you're desperately proud of. It's a house that you have spent an awful lot of money either renovating, cleaning up the garden, or all the rest of it, so you have no interest in downsizing anytime soon. And last time I checked, it should be your choice, not a choice that will be essentially made by the government via how much you have to pay in aged care. Big news. But you do it at a time where everyone's running up to Christmas, everyone's focusing on the new year, or maybe paying attention to the Boxing Day test, and therefore you're not paying attention to the details. Well, that's why I'm trying to give you the update on some of the sneaky things that they tried to float over summer. Another example here too is that the Prime Minister lied about his meetings with Alan Joyce. Now, of course, Alan Joyce, the former boss of Qantas, yes, a bit of a ghost of the past in terms of our day-to-day politics, but there was a long time when Alan Joyce was a man the Prime Minister was more than happy to put his arm around, especially when he was going to use his planes as floating billboards for his unsuccessful $450 million referendum. But then Qantas started to fall apart. Alan Joyce became a public enemy. He was blasted at a Senate committee. And there were, of course, the conversations about just how cheap your flights could be overseas because they wanted to keep Qatar Airlines out. And the Prime Minister was asked many a question in question time about how many meetings he actually ended up having with Alan Joyce. Turns out there was one that he never mentioned and one that only comes to us via the work of the former Senator from South Australia, Rex Patrick, who was able to finally get some access to some of the Prime Minister's diary. And after this was revealed, the Financial Review said that he was back on the Prime Minister about the meetings with Joyce. Prime Minister says it's all a giant conspiracy theory because they never talked about Qatar. Instead, they talked about the workplace relations situation. But still, it was a meeting with the boss of Qantas that you would have thought would have come up when the Prime Minister was being asked last year about just how many meetings he had actually had. Oh, that one, I forgot about that one. But also interesting here is the reporting of Rex Patrick, where he has got into who are the media darlings of this Prime Minister? Who are the people whom have been able to sit one-on-one with him, either for a conversation, a briefing, or an interview inside the Prime Minister's office in Canberra? Now here, interestingly, I'll read directly from the website of which Rex Patrick published this on, that print journalists were afforded the opportunity for one-on-one meetings with the Prime Minister, included the Guardian's political editor, the Sydney Morning Herald's, well, there you go, old nasty Nikki Sava in the front of the queue. The SMH political and international editor, Peter Harcher, the Sydney Morning Herald's national affairs correspondent, James Massola. Also should point out Greg Sheridan, the defence writer, foreign affairs writer for The Australian, was also in there. But just pay attention to Catherine Murphy from The Guardian, nasty Nikki Sava in the Sydney Morning Herald, or Peter Harcher in the Sydney Morning Herald. Because these are often the people who are the first amongst the press gallery to deliver one message and one message only, which is Dutton bad, Dutton the problem, vote for Albo because he's not Dutton, Dutton is the new Trump, you know, all of that stuff. And of course, these will be the people who will be the first recipients of the Prime Minister's Dirt Unit, which was set up last year after the referendum with the whole hope of turning Australian politics into a referendum on the opposition leader as opposed to the underperformance of the Prime Minister and the government. This is the direct play of Joe Biden. Vote for me because I'm not him. Well, has my life got any better under you? No, but vote for me because I'm not him. Also, fifth and final of the things that happened over summer when they hoped you were looking the other way, and I'm bringing everyone up to date so we're all on the same page here on show one. Each way elbow. Each way elbows exactly in the same way when it comes to a republic. Now, as we know, I mention it for the 400th time at least tonight, the Voice referendum fails, 60%, hell no to the Prime Minister's idea. Even Victoria said no to the $450 million idea that Australia didn't want, and a wasted year of prime ministerial attention that, despite the fact it's all about cost of living, an extreme majority of Australians say, no, you're not doing enough, and probably it's going to get worse. Well, the Prime Minister was asked by a few people over summer about whether the next cab off the rank for constitutional reform is whether Australia should become a republic.
What I don't want to do is to be a Prime Minister who presides over just constitutional debates.
Now, that was what he said in a pre-recorded interview many months earlier with Piers Morgan, but he went on to say at press conferences that there was no priority, that there was no timing around all of this. So, OK, the Republic's in the bin for a little while because they're still licking their wounds over the yes-no vote when it comes to the issues in and around the Voice. So how does this become an each-way elbow? What is the news that you're breaking for me tonight, Paul? Well, I'm just underlining the point that if Australia is no plan of becoming a republic anytime soon, certainly not in this term, most likely not in the next term of government, then why are you, the taxpayer, spending money for a dedicated assistant minister to have the sole job of 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, talking about the Republic in Matt Thistlethwaite? If Anthony Albanese is serious, then he can trim his front bench by one. He can remove this position. He could redeploy Matt Thistlethwaite as, say, the cost of living minister. But instead, no, there's a full-time minister with full-time public servants that are dedicated to an idea that the Prime Minister himself has said is not urgent. Now, that's not the attitude for the Education Minister, the Aged Care Minister, the Treasurer, the Defence Minister, but somehow you get a pass if it's for the Republic, hence why Each Way Albo is just as alive in 2024 as it was last year, the year before, the year before, the year before, the year before, and many years before that. So let's turn to 2024. There is one political test that will come in the next couple of months that will tell us whether all of that polling that we've showed you, from the Guardian to the Sydney Morning Herald to the Australian newspaper, the TV polling that has shown that the government is a little on the nose, and certainly the issue of cost of living is the number one problem for the government. And that will be at the by-election in the seat of Dunkley. Now, Dunkley is located just above the Mornington Peninsula, but it is, the coastal area is just outside of Melbourne. Most notably, the most famous part of it is the city of Frankston. We've done shows from Frankston before, lovely part of Australia. But also this is an area that you would think, if there is a protest vote that is there to be garnered against this government, then the people who live in working class Frankston, well, they would end up turning around and punishing the government. Now, this is a major test for the government to be able to hold on to the seat. It will mean that essentially there is not a huge amount of electoral consequences to the many problems that have happened, and Australians are saying one thing and voting another way when it comes to things like cost of living. It's also going to be a test of Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party about whether they are able to find a way to register protest at a polling booth against the Prime Minister, not just in the polls that we talk about so frequently. Now, this seat is one that, while currently Labor, has been previously a Liberal Party seat, not 25 years ago, but have a look at this. In 2022, Labor won the seat by 12,000 votes. The MP who was elected then passed away from cancer, and now we know that that's why we're going to have a by-election. In 2019, the same MP was able to win, but with a much smaller margin of 5,000 votes. But in 2016, it was the Liberal Party who held the seat. 2013 and 2007 also wins for the Liberal Party. So this is not territory that the Liberal Party can pretend to say is heartland Labor, and Labor can't turn around and say that it's heartland Liberal. It's one of those areas that is right on the edge right now. Now, if you look at those numbers, it's gone from being not even secure, but a nice margin for the Liberal Party, all the way down to now a nice margin for the Labor Party. So is there going to be a scenario where the margin just falls back a little bit towards the middle, or will it start to move to a razor-thin win for the Liberal Party? We will all find out together. Labor has now named its local candidate that will end up running for them with the hope of being able to hold on to the seat in the Parliament. And the Liberal Party has chosen somebody who many of us have sat and talked about for a long period of time, which is the local mayor. That one of the problems for the Liberal Party, generally speaking, is that you either have people nobody's ever heard of in the area, or certainly people that don't have the profile like many Labor people do, which is to be the local mayor. Well, this bloke is the local mayor of Frankston. He should be able to move some votes. But Victoria, of course, is a place where the Liberal Party vote is very low at the state level. The negatives against Peter Dutton are particularly high, and no doubt many of those journalists that I mentioned before, well, they will be plugging and pushing as hard as possible between now and then that all of this is some sort of a referendum, not on cost of living, but on Peter Dutton. So watch this space. Dunkley's going to be big in the next little while, which is surprisingly, or not surprisingly, dare I say, why the Prime Minister has been saying that he may well be fast-tracking cost of living relief. You mean he'll try to do it for a by-election, but he wouldn't do it at the end of the mid-year economic review? He didn't do it at the last federal budget, didn't do it at the mid-year economic review before that. It's only when there's actually a chance of losing some skin in the game that they turn around and need to act at all, right? And again, on cost of living, as people get ready to send their kids back to school, depending on what state and what type of school that you go to, that could be the next couple of weeks, or it could feel like the next couple of months. It is fun to spend a lot of time with your kids over summer, but school, good, important that they're there. Well, today we learned via the Daily Telegraph about just how much money public school students have to pay to go to so-called free education. Now, deeply respected think tank Officeworks is one of the bits of data here. So I don't quite know why they're trying to get the word out when it is their business that they are slightly slagging off. But anyway, the average Sydney parents are expected to drop about $1,141 per child on pencils, pens, calculators, technology that means the kids are able to go back to school. Meantime, YouGov's annual back-to-school research has suggested that it is about $944 to send your kids back to free education. This is before you sign them up to band and all the other things. And in terms of the items which are making up the biggest spend here are things like personal devices such as laptops, $496 per person or per student in New South Wales, uniforms $229, sporting gear $138, lunch boxes $102. How much is a lunch box? And textbooks at $88 and stationery $87. Which brings me to the reality of a theme that we had a lot last year and is going to be very much this year, which is the people who are genuinely forgotten in a first world country, where so many of us are quite comfortable. A lot of people are in great difficulty, but there is way too many people who are struggling. The people who literally this Christmas had to choose between paying the basic bills for the roof over the head and the presents that they were giving to their kids. The hundreds of thousands of people who had to interact with a charity to be able to have some sort of a Christmas that felt like it was something different or, dare I say, normal. And then there's the reality that despite the fact that we are this wonderful country with a government that has more money than it has ever had before, with an apparent surplus last year and a projected surplus on its way this year, that there are charities where you can sponsor a kid in Australia. The Smith family, each and every year, always has this opportunity. The ads break my heart. Just like the ads about animals or things happening on the other side of the world. There are appeals for you to give your money to make sure that a kid in Australia can start the school year on par with everyone else. It's for things like uniforms, excursions. That's really important. It's about things like learning support, local support as well. If you have any ability to give, and I won't hit you up every night with a cause, but you know I'm a softie when it comes to these things, please go to the website, thesmithfamily.com.au, smithfamily.com.au, sponsor a kid. I know it's offensive, I know it's outrageous, I know that the federal government, state government, all the rest of it, and it shouldn't be you that's paying. But just like when it came to Humpty Dumpty and lots of other things we get behind, like Kids Helpline, please do this, smithfamily.com.au. And before we get to the first of our many crackerjack debates that will be happening this year, the Iowa caucus takes place in the next 24 hours. By this time tomorrow night, we will know what we already believe is going to happen, which is Donald Trump's going to win. Now, as you know, to become the president, you need to win the nomination of your party. The way that works is that you have to literally win a primary, which is a straight-up vote, or a caucus, which is literally when people go to corners of rooms to eventually get the delegates that get sent to a national convention for you to become the nominee of the party. Now, Joe Biden, they're rigging the process where they're pretending there's no other options. For the Republicans, it's kind of people who say, yeah, Trump might be in some trouble with the amount of court cases he has to go to or whether his name gets dropped off the ballot, so please vote for me as number 2. But till then, as Donald Trump's around, he's got 48% of the vote, according to the poll that basically is always bang on when it comes to Iowa. Nikki Haley is the next best, but her vote normally comes from people who are planning to vote for Biden. Ron DeSantis, who they all thought at one point in time was going to be the challenger, well, I think if he gets 3rd and 16%, he'll drop out of the race in the next couple of weeks. Then there's Vivek and a whole bunch of others. But one of the things that is really interesting to tell you about with the Iowa caucuses is that Iowa is bloody cold. And it is very, very cold this particular year. In fact, the suggestions are that minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit do the sums in your head there, is going to be the case once you throw in the wind chill. And who wants to leave the house to go and stand in front of your local neighbours to say whether you're going to vote for Trump or Haley or DeSantis? Well, Donald Trump had this message today as the closing message to those that are thinking, I don't want to go outside because it's really cold and I might get sick.
You can't sit home. If you're sick as a dog, you say, darling, I gotta make it. Even if you vote and then pass away, it's worth it. If you're sick, if you're just so sick you can't, darling, I don't think, get up. Get up. You get up, you vote.
Now, that's loyalty. Vote for me, even if you might die. And he's probably going to win by this time tomorrow. Plenty more to discuss in our first great debate for the year, and we thought we should put up two of our best, none other than Matt Canavan, Nicholas Rees. Lots to talk about what they hid for us over summer and what's ahead in 2024. More in a sec here on Paul Murray Live. Great to be back. Thank you very much for watching. All right, happy 2024. Geez, we're all getting old, aren't we? To none other than the wonderful Matt Canavan joining us, of course, in beautiful rocky Yeppoon, to be absolute about it, of course, there in Queensland. And the man who's the Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne, who's been enjoying just a very fruitful summer in the laneways of the great city, Nicholas Rees. Lads, hello. Happy 2024 to both of you. I hope you're having a wonderful summer. So, let's start here. Nicholas, the great minds of the Labor Party, they were able to blame Philip Lowe and the Reserve Bank for all the issues to do with the elbow dozen of interest rate rises. Now, the plan is that cost of living is only about supermarkets. It's all about supermarkets. It's nothing else whatsoever. That seems to be the play. Is this going to work, or are we just going to have a month of them being able to point at somebody and all of us just have to end up paying more?
Well, it is the case that the inflation figures out last week were pretty good, lowest number we've had in a long time. So that does indicate, if the number is accurate, that across the broader economy, prices are not growing at the rate they have been. But certainly when it comes to supermarket prices, we do seem to have collectively, as a nation, reached a tipping point, you know, where things kind of keep going, and then suddenly everybody almost simultaneously looks at the bill and goes, what the hell is going on there? So they've got Craig Emerson, who I'm sure everyone on this panel agree is a very a good mind and a trusted pair of hands, and he's a straight shooter as well. So he's going to do a review of what's going on in the supermarkets. We've got the ACCC looking at things. There's a Senate inquiry as well, having a look. Albanese, he's talking tough, says that he might change the supermarket code from being voluntary to mandatory, and he'll take whatever action he needs to. So, look, I think they're saying the right things and they're doing the right things, but of course the proof will be what happens over the next couple of months.
Yeah, Matt, look, we all know from Rudd and Grocery Watch to the amount of money and dairy farmers, all the rest of it here, this is well-trodden ground. To me, bashing the supermarkets is like bashing banks. It feels good, but nothing ever seems to change. But what do you think?
Well, I'm glad to start off with start 2024 with a debate. I disagree completely with Nicholas there. I mean, Craig Emerson's not the man for this role. I'm glad you mentioned Grocery Watch, Paul, because the minister responsible for presiding over the Grocery Watch failure was none other than Dr. Craig Emerson. He was competition minister at the time. They shut down the Grocery Watch website. In fairness to Craig, the guy who started the process was a little man called Chris Bowen. Chris Bowen started Grocery Watch, and Craig Emerson had to come in and get rid of it. Nothing much changes, does it?
Such
it's just too funny.
Look, I'm going to have to say 15 laughs. Well done.
Craig Emerson.
Yeah. Well played.
While he was competition minister, Craig Emerson wrote a scathing piece in The Australian calling out people who wanted to put in tougher competition laws on Coles and Woolworths, in particular ideas from the Nationals Party that wanted to look at divestiture powers, which exist in all other developed countries, specifically to target Coles and Woolies. Craig Emerson called these policies zany. And so if the Prime Minister was serious here about taking Coles and Woolworths to task, he wouldn't appoint someone to do a review into them who had previously called policies to attack the competition issues in this sector, in the supermarket sector, as zany. This is clearly a setup. I know Craig Emerson well. I mean, I'll agree with Nick. He's a smart guy. There's no doubt about that. but he is going to be on the side of big business here. That's everything he's done in his career indicates that. He will not be on the side of small businesses here. That's not been his record. And this looks like it's going to be a complete damp squib. If we're serious here, if we're really serious, let's get those divestiture powers in. That's the only way to pull in the big supermarket chains like Coles and Woolworths.
Okay,
So
what does
if you keep acting like this,
mean?
well, we'll split you up just like other countries do.
What does that mean? In practical terms, what does that mean?
Well, in other countries, in the UK and the US, if companies show repeated anti-competitive conduct, the government can order that those companies be split into smaller parts. This has happened in the US before with their telecommunications industry. In fact, Ronald Reagan did that. In the 1980s, Microsoft was threatened with that, and they did have to make some changes to their internet browser and what have you because of these laws. These laws are a big stick. They're not often used, but usually in these circumstances, it's good to carry a big stick and not have to and only have to use it sparingly.
Nick, feel free to answer the question that you preferred me ask, but I'll ask this one anyway, which is obviously smarty pants in the government are trying to work out, okay, we know there's got a bit of aggro in this area, so we've got to find somewhere to channel this staff, make it look like there's a level of accountability. Certainly, you know, this is what happened when it came to the Reserve Bank and the changes there with Philip Lowe, despite the fact that the incoming one seemed to say a lot of the same things that Philip Lowe had said. Then we changed the whole way the Reserve Bank works when it comes to interest rates. We know that, you know, hauling Joyce before senators was good because it meant that there was this focal point of rage and people could US-style yell at Alan Joyce before he was running out the door anyway. Is that the idea here? Because unless you're talking about the ultimate sanction of the government is to use the power of the laws that it has to say, you know what, enough. We've had 500 inquiries, 300 people telling us what's wrong every single year about these things. Unless we're threatening to break you up, then this is all noise for politics, isn't it?
Well, I do think that Anthony Albanese is talking pretty tough on this. I mean, look, we all know supermarket profits have gone up. That's provable.
Do something.
We know farm gate prices are down, and we know that prices on the shelves are up. We're all feeling that. So these are all provable points.
You just said it was all
I do think, you know, it's often the case. You would have all seen the play before where the Prime Minister takes a more conciliatory tone and wheels out ministers to go tougher. But I think Albanese is being pretty tough on this. Now, I'll be the first to say the proof is in the pudding and the eating of the pudding that's coming. So let's see what comes out of this Emerson review. He's already flagging that he'll have a look at making the supermarket grocery code mandatory, which is more than Matt Canavan and his crew did in the 11 or so years they were in government. I haven't heard anything in the government talking about divestiture, but that's a big call, Matt, tonight. Are you saying that you think the supermarket should be broken up?
I've supported it. I've written Senate inquiries on it. It's Nationals Party policy. I admit, I mean, the problem we've got here is there's a cabal between elements of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party to protect big business. And so we've got to smash that. There's an opportunity to smash that here right now because I agree, there's not enough competition in our supermarket sector. This is an opportunity to align ourselves to the rest of the world and have these proper competition laws in place. And so we have proper competition in our supermarkets for our farmers, for retail consumers. So this is something that should come in. We should do this. We can do this right now. Otherwise, it's all talk. You can tell the way the Prime Minister's talking. I know exactly what's happening. He says these comments in a media statement. Then behind the scenes, his office and the corporate affairs people talk to each other and say, hey, look, Woolworths and Coles, we still love you. We don't really care. We just got to say these things in public, all right, just to take some skin off you. That's exactly what's going on here. It's all a big setup.
Yeah, also, I mean, if they're serious about short-term things that will have effects in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 24 months, this government could turn around and delay or cancel its heavy vehicle taxes, which, of course, are going to be adding to the cost of transportation of all of the things that end up in supermarkets. But, you know, silly little me, remembering the policies the government actually puts forward, not the inquiries that apparently will fix what they could fix of their own policies. Now, I want to ask you about this, Matt, which is it's been a bad summer for major renewable projects, and I say bad summer from them because everyone from Tanya Plibersek through to several courts, even some other institutions, are starting to turn around and say, no, it's not a right fit. The offshore wind stuff in Victoria, the Victorian government and the federal government at loggerheads, that may well not happen. And then there's the scenario about that major solar farm, which was going to go outside of Mudgee. We talked about this for a very long period of time. And again, this looks like it's going to be knocked back.
Yeah, well, exactly right, Paul. Fortunately, we haven't had the raging bushfires that were predicted by the Bureau of Meteorology when they said we'd have a dry, hot El Nino summer. Haven't had those, but there is a raging fire building in rural and regional areas against these large-scale industrial renewable energy projects. It's happening all around the country, where largely foreign investors think they can just march into country towns and blanket landscapes with wind factories and solar factories, completely change the ambience of communities, take away agricultural land and the productive base of those communities. And then once these industrial facilities are built, there's nothing left. There's no jobs left really in a built wind factory or solar factory. It's just a sugar hit while construction's going on for the town. So there's been a big reaction against this. There's be a rally in Parliament House or out the front of Parliament House on February the 6th, the first day back. Thousands are coming to Canberra because enough is enough. The local communities should have a say here. If mining companies, if manufacturing firms have to have a so-called social licence, why don't foreign-based investors in the renewable energy space similarly need to get community support before they proceed with these large-scale projects?
Here. Look, send the details about how we can get it out on the socials. We'll mention it on the show. We want as many people to be there as possible, if you can make it, the first day of Parliament back in the first week of February. Nicholas, this is the central problem, right? We're now not having a conversation about are renewables the future, all right? We're not having a conversation about does climate change exist. We're having the basic conversation that you and I have had for the best part of 10 years, which is the cost of transition, and now part of that is the cost to communities of transition. Now, you may well be able to find individual landholders that are willing to sell off a pocket of their farm to put up some solar or some wind, but then you start to see the very areas that don't want this stuff to start to turn around and push back, including environmental groups about things like offshore wind. Bowen knows this is a problem because he came out in the past couple of days and Casanova said, get on with it sooner rather than later, cut the red tape, approve these things. Well, at some point in time, there is going to be a backlash here, and I think it's going to come in lots of different ways.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, I love renewables. I love solar. I love wind, and so I want to see those projects going.
Have them in Melbourne.
Well, I'm sorry. I want to see more. I want to see more solar, and I want to see more wind. But that
Put them in Melbourne.
mean
Put a solar farm in the Botanic Gardens,
absolutely.
then, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Come on, Matt. I mean, you sort of started the show tonight telling us how you're about standing up against big interests. Well, you seem to be the national spokesperson for big coal, as far as I can tell.
Why don't you put some solar?
And you're all for
just take away some buildings.
You're all for more competition, except if it's more competition for coal in the form of renewables.
Wind farms in Federation Square.
Well, why don't you just do it in Melbourne? I've got no problem with you doing it in Melbourne. You're the deputy mayor. Go for your life.
I support renewables, but that doesn't mean that wind farms and solar farms make sense everywhere. And I think that, look, following that debate in Mudgee, it looks to me like the local mayor's made a really good point about not putting a huge solar farm right at the entrance to the city. Now, as for the case of this Barney that's going on between Victorian Labor government and the federal Labor government over this Western Port terminal, it's hard to know, who's right and wrong there, but I do hope they can sort it out, because it's about building a facility where they can receive and then turn around and construct the turbines for the big offshore wind farm developments they want to build off the coast of Victoria. And that's what's happened in Europe. Like, you go up through the North Sea and up through Scandinavia, they've got these huge offshore wind farms that are being built, and they're helping powering the continent. And that's what we want to see here in Australia. It would be absolutely terrific. They've just got to work out the right location for where to build the facility that will help deliver it.
Look, because I scored a double ton in the first innings and went a little longer, I have cut a bit of your time tonight, so I apologise. But stick around, have some drinks. The cricket metaphor continues, where you get the chance to give us your bold predictions for the year ahead, and I want to have a chat about what happened at Summer Nats. Yes, a bogan event close to my heart, and because it annoys so many people in Canberra, one I will continue to support. Quick break, back with more. An Aussie became a royal today. We'll have a chat about it in a sec. Back to the boys in a second, but we all know that the lovely ladies in our life, you often refer to them as the queen of your household. Well, literally, the queen of Denmark is, of course, Sheila from Tasmania. Julia Bradley has been there to see Mary's ascension to the throne, King Frederick and all the rest of it. Well, it looks bloody cold where you are, but give me an idea. How have they spent their first day as king and queen together?
Well, Paul, they've wasted no time. Our new king here in Denmark, Frederik, and our very own Queen Mary. We saw them out and about at the Danish Parliament this morning, and that's where they were officially being received. Now, you got it exactly right. It is incredibly cold here in Denmark. In fact, this morning it started snowing for the first time since I've been here covering this major event. It's a beautiful landscape at the moment. We've seen so many families, young kids walking around waving their Danish flags, just wanting to catch a glimpse of the new monarchs here in Denmark. So there was a large crowd outside of Parliament this morning as people were waiting to see the King and Queen arrive. When they arrived, all of the media there packed in, just trying to get a response from Frederik or from Mary. I did my very, very best to try to get a response from Mary, asking her if she had a message for the Aussies. Unfortunately, she brushed me, but I won't hold it against her. I still have so much love for our Tassie-grown Mary. Here was that moment. Queen Mary, do you have a message for the Aussies? So I did my very best there, Paul. Unfortunately, nothing from Mary there. Maybe next time I'll give it a go. I'll bring some Tim Tams or a tub of Vegemite and see if that helps sweeten the deal at all. But people outside of Parliament were just so excited to be there after that historic proclamation yesterday. We spoke to some people about why they love Frederik and Mary so much. What do you think of the new King and Queen?
I love them. I love them already. It was so special.
I think they're nice.
What's your message to them?
I love you. You are amazing. I'm proud of you, and you are the reason that I'm proud of to be Danish.
Julia, talking to kids, you're very cute, well played. -2 where you are right now. And by the way, anything you get from the gift shops, you're able to write it off as expenses here at work. So go nuts, get some clocks, and we'll put something in the man cave, all right? Thank you, Julia. We'll see you during the news. Julia Bradley, how good is she? Of course, so they're celebrating and Sheila from Tasmania becoming a Queen of Denmark. I love it. Fantastic. All right, 2 men that are kings of their household and would refer to their better halves as queens of their world. See that? That's called a segue, kids. There's none other than, of course, Nicholas Rees and, of course, Matt Canavan. Lads, bold prediction for 2024. These are legally binding. Matt, what's absolutely happening this year?
Well, I think you asked me this just before Christmas, and I said Trump would be president by the end of the year. I still think that's probably likely, although I suppose the concern is there might be something in between to try and stop that. There's so many people who don't want to see him president. So, look, I'm very concerned where the world's at and what might happen in between now and then, but barring that, I think Trump's on track to be president, well, I suppose in January next year, January 20 next year.
I tell you, I am really fascinated by what's going to happen in that Supreme Court. They love ruling states' rights. If they do that, then his ability to be bounced off the ballot may well be, over before it begins. But we'll wait and see. Of course, results in Iowa. What about that final closer? Vote even if you're going to die, because it'll be worth it, because I'll win. I love it. All right, Nicholas, your bold prediction, definitely going to happen this year.
Look, I'll do one obvious one and one bold one. I think Keir Starmer and Labor are going to win the election in Britain later this year. It'll be the first time the government has changed in that country for around 15 years. And unlike the US, I think it'll be probably a good example of how in democracy you can have a transferal of power between politically opposing parties and do it without bloodshed. The big bold one I'm going to predict, though, is that I reckon Labor is going to do something to refashion those stage 3 tax cuts, make them fairer, but still make sure the economy gets them and the people get them as well.
That's code for everyone over 180. Be worried, everyone under it will be okay. Thank you very much. Do appreciate it, guys. See you again as we go throughout the year and continue to do what we do best, which is agree upon everything. Quick break. Back with more. I'll tell you some of the stuff that I absolutely think you've got to check out if you've still got some time over summer to yourself. Some details of all of that, and of course the late debate for 3 and a bit minutes from now. I was going to do this whole thing where I was going to tell you how amazing Wonka is. It is amazing, but now it's the late debate. See you tomorrow.